What a complete and sincere answer. And it's a fraud on the Canadians. Since the Prime Minister took office, over $250 million have been given to GC Strategies, two guys working in their basement. $20 million alone for the Arrive scam. Criminality is rampant, with Evidence Committee has recently heard. The Arrive scam is just like the Prime Minister, not worth the cost, not worth the corruption. Fleeced taxpayers want an honest answer. Will the Prime Minister finally call on the RCMP to expand the investigation? Yes or no?
Continue to be ongoing investigations, both external and otherwise, into the contracting process. It is obvious that the contracting process rules were not followed in this case, and we need to make sure that there is accountability and transparency around that. But let us remember that during the pandemic, we were reaching out to try and keep people safe, keep people alive, make sure that our economy didn't falter at a time where everything was in question. Even in those most difficult times, we need to make sure the rules were followed. When public servants, in this case, did not follow the rules adequately, there are investigations and there will be consequences.
Hey gang, what's up? Just Ehren right here, Question Period Canada. The ARRIVECAN scam scandal is being investigated by right there Larry Brock, and he gets a chance to interview the two employees that were working on this terrible app that was a huge waste of money for the Trudeau government. These guys are answering the questions, and they come off as pretty sincere. They come off as honest, I think. Let's check it out. We have so much footage. It's super interesting. Let's get right into it.
Some of these are not easy to answer quickly, sir. We're not questioning the AG's findings. We're questioning the inputs. If the AG wasn't given the proper inputs, then she wouldn't be able to have the proper outputs. And I think everybody understands that. But we're not questioning her or her office at all. And I want to be very clear about that. If the RCMP has something to investigate, both Mr. Utano and I feel they should be free to conduct their investigation. What we feel very strongly about is that the CBSA is trying to cover something up. They've doubled down, and they've created this false preliminary statement of falsehood just to basically destroy our credibility. They shared it with our employers when it clearly wasn't ready. There's clearly facts within it that are just so false and incorrect. It's unbelievable, and that's what we have a problem with. That's why we went to the courts, Mr. Bachrach. Just to be clear, we're not asking for the investigation to go away. We're asking for an independent investigation because we don't believe the CBSA is capable of doing one. Thank you.
As outlined by the Auditor General, the pandemic urgency can never justify corruption and oversight failures outlined in this report. The awarding of contractors favor GC Strategies, securing almost $20 million without competition. The CBSA's disregard for basic management practices compromised accountability, competition, and value for money. This Prime Minister is not worth the cost, crime, or corruption. Will fleeced Canadian taxpayers get their money back?
I want to take my opening round with both of you to put a fine point on this issue. This discussion has to end, and it needs to end today as to who's responsible for the selection of GC Strategies. Canadians want to know. Canadians are rightfully angry that this two-person firm working out of their basement doing no IT work have collected almost $20 million in taxpayer funds. So I can understand why the government wants to shield themselves, the Justin Trudeau government wants to shield themselves from any responsibility. So I know the Auditor General was unable to precisely identify which individual. She made a suggestion, Mr. Utano, that perhaps you should accept responsibility for it. Her words were that you signed the requisition on behalf of the agency, which amounts to an exercise of delegated authority and carries with it responsibility and accountability. But prior to that particular statement, did you not meet with the Auditor General's team?
We met with the Auditor General for approximately 30 minutes. Once I'm told, the report was already drafted. Essentially, I believe we were just a ticky box.
Okay. Mr. McDonald, you met with the AG team?
I met with the AG team the same day as Mr. Utano.
And did the issue as to who chose GC Strategies come up?
Yes, that was one of the first questions that came up, and right,
And you provided documentation to support your theory as to who chose GC Strategies?
yes, I did.
And who was that person again?
It was Mindone and the
Mindone.
president.
Did you supply any information by way of an ATIP to the AG?
Yes, I supplied the same information that I put forward to OGO to
Okay.
show the three components of all of the selections of GC strategies.
And within that ATIP, there was a briefing preparatory package which contained an item that I brought to the attention of departmental officials. Whose decision was it to contract GC? I'm going to read this out and I want an explanation. My office made the decision to pursue the contract with GC Strategies. The two proposals for the work were presented to the CIO and president, and the decision was made to proceed with GC Strategies as their proposal and approach aligned with what the CBSA was looking for, particularly rapid staff augmentation. The Deloitte proposal was a managed service using their cloud instance. This would have involved additional risk and did not align with our direction to build cloud mob competencies within the agency. Who are they referring to?
They're referring to Mindone and John Izowski, and the reason why it was written like that was because Mindone had a fake heart attack and Kelly Belanger took over for him. So the notes were updated so that Kelly Belanger could attend OGO with Ehren O'Gorman, as she did. The record will reflect it, and that's why it was written there. But the question you have to ask yourself is, who was the CIO and who was the president when the decision was made?
Who was the CIO at that time?
Mindone,
Mindone. And the president?
John Izowski.
Osowski. Now, you've identified individuals who have misled the committee. I'm not going to use the word who misled. I want to know who lied to committee, who lied to parliamentarians, who lied to Canadians. Identify those players, please.
Well, frankly, if you look at that package that I provided to the OAG, there are three components. The first one shows clearly that Mindone and John Izowski were the ones that selected. The second,
Don't lie to Canadians.
Mindone has completely lied to Canadians. on
Did John
multiple fronts.
Osowski lie to Canadians when he appeared at committee?
I can only assume that that's what he did because this is what Ehren O'Gorman's own documentation preparing for OGO says. And even Ehren O'Gorman pretended that she didn't know who selected GC Strategies, yet she was briefed on it.
Right.
Specifically, the third component says, please send this and the national security exemption request from Jonathan Moore that Mindone was copied on to Ehren O'Gorman's own office. Like, it just doesn't make any sense that
When
nobody would
Erin
know.
O'Gorman appeared at committee last week, she was shocked that we were focusing so much attention on her. Did she lie to committee? Did she lie to Canadians that she had no responsibility or no knowledge as to who chose GC Strategies? Yes or no, sir?
Yes.
Thank you.
Speaker, last night in shameful display, the NDP Liberal Coalition tried to shut down the committee studying the ARRIVECAN scam. This $54 million egregious abuse of taxpayers must be fully studied. Canadians deserve no less. More and more details are being revealed, and the corruption within the CBSA and this government is astonishing. The walls are caving in, the rot is being exposed. What is the coalition so desperate to hide?
So despite the unsuccessful efforts of my Liberal colleagues today and actually throughout this week to try to spin the narrative that Canadians received really good value for the $60 million wasted on this Arrive scam, we often hear that it saved lives, and there's really no empirical evidence to suggest that one life was actually saved, yet the Liberals continue with this narrative. And I think Canadians would actually prefer the independent voice of the Auditor General on the issue of value and not biased Liberal members. So I'm going to put that phrase to you in her report. The Canadian Border Services Agency's disregard for policies, controls, and transparency in the contracting process restricted opportunities for competition and undermined value for money. Emphasis, value for money. So the focus that I have for the amount of time I have left is to really drill down on the guess that the Auditor General made with respect to what this fiasco costs Canadians. It's almost $60 million, but that doesn't include the probably millions of dollars that were paid to the federal public service. So can you offer any suggestion as to how many millions of dollars on top of that $60 million was actually paid to the professional federal public service?
So I'll start with that. So with respect to responsibilities on the oversight of what this whole thing costs, that does not fall on the technical delivery teams. So to give you an estimate on what it costs to pay public servants, I don't have that answer, Mr. Brock.
But you can confirm that federal public servants did work over the number of years that the 177 different applications of this Arrive scam was being rolled out. We did have federal public servants working, correct?
That's
Absolutely,
correct.
we have.
Absolutely. Okay.
And not just
there's a cost.
Not just within the agency, the CBSA, but we also have to look at PHAC and the other
Absolutely.
agencies. And then we're not responsible for providing that whole.
Absolutely. Okay. And we don't know what that number is, but it's going to be more than the $60 million estimate. And we also have evidence from the from the Auditor General that there were actual millions of dollars paid out to contractors who did zero work on the ARRIVECAN, but actually unrelated work. Now, do you have evidence for the time that you were at CBSA of entities coming forward, knowing that there was a pot of unlimited resources to take advantage of, seeking millions of dollars or hundreds of thousands of dollars for projects unrelated to ARRIVECAN? Mr. McDonald.
I don't have any evidence of wrongdoing, just to be clear. I think what I would say is that there were divisions, federal public servants who wanted to associate with ARRIVECAN so that they could get the funding that they needed to move their initiatives forward.
Give me some examples, sir.
Well, there were a few in commercial. There were a few other in travelers. We had some corollary projects that we had already started, some no-touch mobile, the e-declaration, some of these things that we were trying to work on. And if you could just put it under an ARRIVECAN tagline, it was easier to achieve the funding and get the budget that you wanted from the finance branch. So oftentimes what people would do is if they had overall agendas, they would associate it with what was going on in the pandemic, and then ARRIVECAN, they would get the budget for it, and then they would move it closer to it.
Essentially lying to access taxpayer money using the tagline ARRIVECAN. Is that fair to say?
I have to be honest with you, I wouldn't call it a lie. I would call it perhaps an exaggeration, but they would align what they were hoping to achieve as their target with what was happening as ARRIVECAN to obtain their outcome. It's a stretch. There's a very big difference between a stretch and a lie, in my opinion. But I never saw anybody nefariously lie so that they could get access to hundreds of thousands of dollars. But let's say they were loosely coupled.
Mr. McDonald, I believe in black and white. I don't believe in gray. Okay? If people are accessing taxpayer funds that has absolutely nothing to do with the ARRIVECAN application and development, they are misleading government officials to access taxpayer funds. I call that misleading. I call that an absolute lie. How many millions of dollars can you estimate was actually spent on individuals, organizations that you just described?
I left after the first year. I wouldn't even be able to hazard a guess, but I would say the number would be higher than $1 million if you totaled it from my vantage point.
Okay.
That is
that
your
my
time.
Thank
Yep.
you.
Mike Barrett has also been hot on this ARRIVECAN scam scandal, trying to get answers, trying to figure out where all this money went. Let's take a look at Mike.
Common sense conservatives will put forward a motion summoning the principals of GC Strategies to appear before the Government Operations Committee. Now, GC Strategies, of course, is the two-person firm who worked on Justin Trudeau's $60 million Arrive scam scandal. But this app had this $20 million contract where this company did no actual IT work, and they have now twice refused to appear, having been summoned by committee. And the effect of today's motion will be to use the full power of the House of Commons to have these individuals appear before committee. It's in Auditor General's report. She said, quote, "We found situations where agency employees were involved in the ARRIVECAN project, were invited by vendors to dinners and other activities," end quote. Mr. McDonald, were you invited to dinners, meals, or other activities by any ARRIVECAN vendors? Yes or no, please?
If I was invited to any dinners or activities with vendors, I disclosed it to my supervisor.
Question, sir. The question was, and I'll repeat it for you, were you invited?
I'm telling you the truth. I had been invited, but
Okay, that's a yes. Mr. Otano, were you invited to dinners, meals, or other activities by ARRIVECAN vendors?
At the time during ARRIVECAN, no. And if any,
Were you at any time, before or after the ARRIVECAN project, at an event, meal, or activity with any of the vendors who were contracted by the Government of Canada to work on the ARRIVECAN project?
so Mr. Chair, thanks for the question. The short answer is I was at one dinner, and that was disclosed to my boss, and which at Mindone at the time. In fact, my boss was present. So any activities or suggestions of gifts or hospitalities were openly and transparently disclosed.
You waved a bag around when you were making your opening statement. Did you bring bottles for any whiskey tastings that you were a part of?
There are no bottles of whiskey tasting.
Did you participate in any whiskey tastings that were sponsored or paid for by vendors who were paid by the Government of Canada for the ARRIVECAN scandal?
Mr. Chair, this is a perfect example where things are taken out of context. And if I could, I'd like to address the minister.
Series of questions. If you can answer the questions, I'm sure you'll have a time to get to those particular details. Did you accept free alcohol from vendors who worked on ARRIVECAN? Yes or no?
In the plural, no. There was one Zoom call event.
Thank you. Mr. McDonald, same question.
I had a package arrive at my house.
What was in the package?
There were little vials of whiskey.
Vials of whiskey.
Yes.
Okay.
These were after contracts were in
these
place.
would be the size that you'd get at a hotel or on an airplane?
Smaller,
Okay. And how many bottles?
4 or 5.
Like the bag. These were disclosed. What was the name of the professional standards office that you referenced, Mr. Utano?
That was the Values and Ethics Office of the
Did you
CPSA.
disclose to the Values and Ethics Office your participation in and consumption of these products that were provided to you by a vendor who had been paid $20 million for work on this project?
So the disclosure happened to our VP on
So
multiple occasions, as per the policy.
So why did the bag get disclosed but not the free drinks?
The bags were asked in advance, and we were asked if it was acceptable, and we took the steps and procedures ahead of time because we were aware of it ahead of time. The allegations and the development of this report insinuates that we didn't follow procedures. We did, sir.
Did you eat meals, snacks, or consume beverages at any time that were paid for by these vendors? And if so, which vendors?
Are you asking me? Yeah. So we did consume a shared platter. I had a few nachos and a couple of chicken wings and half a beer.
You know the date?
I don't have the date exactly in my
Can
mind.
you undertake to provide the date to the
It
committee?
was it would have been after we were allowed to.
Sir, I'll let you check your records and nail that down. Provide it to the committee along with the names of anyone else who was in attendance. Mr. McDonald, same question to you, please.
I think I had 3 zucchini sticks.
Same
and
event?
half of a beer. Same event.
Only time that you shared a meal that was paid for by
That
these
was
vendors.
paid for by vendors. I just want to make sure the committee is aware, number one, in the preliminary statement of falsehoods, there are allegations that there were dinners. Those dinners were not necessarily vendor-oriented dinners or paid for by the dinners. And so that's why I'm answering the question. Honestly, I paid for my own meals.
Yeah, I haven't asked a question about that. But you did attend dinners with them, is what you're saying.
I have attended dinners with different vendors over the last 3 years that were disclosed per the policy to my supervisor.
Okay. It's interesting to me that the bag was disclosed to a professional standards office, but the free drinks and food were not. Mr. McDonald, are you being investigated by the Royal Canadian Mounted Police?
I don't believe that I am. I haven't been contacted
you
by
haven't
the
been
RCMP, and I think even the statement of fact shows that the
Same question to
CBSA
Mr.
says
O'Tonnell,
themselves
please.
that I didn't do anything.
Mr. O'Tonnell.
Same, I have not been contacted. I'm not aware of any being under any investigation.
So the Auditor General says the RCMP is investigating certain individuals pertaining to ethics and conflicts of interest. The Auditor General said so herself. Do you have any idea who is being investigated?
I'm not aware of who's being
Mr.
investigated.
McDonald, same question.
I'm not aware of anybody that's being investigated.
So there's millions of dollars being passed around. A vendor was allowed to write their own contract for CBSA. It doesn't make sense that some whiskey or meals or zucchini sticks would be sufficient in terms of influence. Do you know of any other individuals who work for the Government of Canada who received any material benefit from vendors that you can share with us today?
I'll start. Maybe I'm not aware of any. Certainly when I was at the CBSA, as I testified last time, I did not see any wrongdoing.
Same question, Mr. O'Tonnell.
Exactly the same. I am not aware of anybody who's received any sort of gifts or hospitality that are influenced them or influenced their actions.
Bloc is the Conservative MP from Saskatchewan who's been trying to get to the bottom of the Arrive scam scandal as well. Hard getting answers, but let's take a look. She's in committee too. First, let's take a look at her in Parliament.
Earlier today, we learned that the Prime Minister's Arrive scam app was not worth the cost or the corruption. The Auditor General found a glaring disregard for mismanagement practices. The process was rigged from the beginning, which appears to be business as usual. After 8 years of this NDP Liberal government, taxpayers are paying a high price for Liberal insiders, and Canadians want answers. Will the NDP Liberal coalition come clean with Canadians or continue the cover-up?
Further testimony on the issue of ARRIVECAN. My first question would be in response to Mr. Utano's answer to my colleague, Mr. Bachrach. Did I hear you say that you were the individual who signed off on the contract requisition to PSPC for the first ARRIVECAN contract awarded to GC Strategies?
So just to be, thank you for the question, Mr. Chair. So to be clear, the requisition was the beginning of the process to put a contract in place. It wasn't the actual contract. And that was only done after the decision was rendered on which direction and vendor to go with to work on a ARRIVECAN application. And that decision came down from our VP and president at the time.
Thank you. But you were the individual who signed off on that requisition.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, for the question. I haven't seen the document that the OEG was referring to, but it sounds in around that the same time frame and area.
Thank you. I guess my next question does refer to the Auditor General's report. Why did you not pursue the alternatives given to you by PSPC to make this contract competitive? In other words, the Auditor General mentioned a suggestion which would have allowed a shorter bidding period of just 10 days, which would have worked with necessary timelines. Why did you not pursue that?
I'll start off if you want to jump in after, but so a couple things, just to put some more context to it. 10 days is the actual timeline that would be put on the street, if you will, for vendors to participate. However, leading up to that, there's the development time to create a proposal, and that takes weeks, if not months, to do. Second, when we worked with PSPC, we worked in conjunction with them as well as our internal controllership with a targeted goal to move forward with an RFP as quickly as possible. The third thing is we were given direction from our superiors that we will not be able to stop. We didn't have the luxury of pausing during the pandemic, and so we followed that direction, and we were working with the experts in procurement and contracting, and we did the best we could with the tools that we had. But we'd never had the authorities to just make unilateral contracting decisions. I just want to reiterate that.
Thank you.
If I could just add a couple of things. The first contract that happened with GC Strategies was, I believe, for about $1.4 million. We were told at the time it was exceptional circumstances. The borders had closed. We had no idea where ARRIVECAN was going. We had no idea what it would turn into. And we were told, go get this done. We need to get something out there. So I have to admit, like, the CBSA, and I say it as an agency, not Mr. Utano or not myself,
Right.
but we did push back at PSBC. Oftentimes people say something can take 10 days, but it can also take 10 weeks.
Sure.
So
Thank you for that. I appreciate that explanation. Mr. Otano, you just said something that has piqued my interest when you talk about curating a proposal. Who is responsible to curate a proposal?
So as far as roles and responsibilities, I can tell you that as the acting DG or DG, we don't have that. We don't have the responsibility to write. We don't write RFPs. We don't do evaluations of submissions, and we don't select.
Who
vendors.
does?
Well, it's done in collaboration with the team. So there'd be
Okay.
there'd be technical authorities and others involved in that.
So can you tell me who was responsible for signing off on the second contract awarded to GC Strategies for ARRIVECAN?
yeah, maybe I'll start with that. So GC Strategies had met with the commercial branch and travelers branch. I wasn't part of it, and they did. They call it a technical bake-off, but there were two companies that were showcasing their technology. I believe it was commercial branch chose the GC Strategies and wrote a justification for national security exemption. That justification went to the CFO, Jonathan Moore, who then wrote a letter to PSPC seeking approval for the national security exemption. I provided this evidence to all committee members. In that letter, it actually states that they had a preferred vendor who had done work with Transport Canada, hence the commercial ties. So we took that on because we were the IT team. But the genesis of the second contract was additional scope to tie into ARRIVECAN that came from the business line.
Thank you. And I guess my next question was who was responsible for signing off on the third contract awarded to GC Strategies? And a follow-up would be who would be responsible for documenting all of these contracts?
The third contract, just to try and answer your question as quickly as possible, the third contract was for accessibility. I believe it was also done under the National Security Exemption banner, which provided PSPC and CBSA with availability to do a sole source. The reason that GC Strategies was chosen for the third contract was kind of like if you were adding scope to kitchen renovation. You're not going to go hire a net new contractor to come in, but you have to have a new contract for it. That's what PSPC said. The original two didn't have that in scope, so we needed a third contract. I hope that answers your question.
Thank you. How much time do I have?
You have minus 20 seconds.
Thanks.
All right, gang, so what's the deal? Do you trust these guys, or are they being thrown under the bus by the Liberal government and the CBSA? By all of these groups, it seems like they just want these guys to fall on their swords, even though they were asking for the situation to be investigated. It's so confusing and so corrupt. Like and subscribe. We're having fun with Canadian politics right here, learning all about it, sharing it with you. Until next video, try to stay warm, have something healthy to eat. We'll see you next time. Thanks for watching.